Yeah.
See how long it's been since I've been here?
We're not, I don't know that we're always televised, but okay.
Okay, I call this meeting of the Budget Committee to order. We'll begin with introductions, starting with the council and then the citizen members and then the staff.
Good evening, I'm Mark Dem, I'm the mayor.
Kathy Heisey, Council President.
Lisa Beatty, counselor.
Adam Conservati, counselor.
I'm Leslie Schachner, citizen member.
I'm David Chitazan, citizen member.
And we have Mary Rao.
Mary Rowe, citizen member.
Okay, so this is the quarterly budget review. We'll get started. The next order of business is the approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any comments or corrections to the minutes for the meetings of April 30th and May 7th?
No.
I actually do. I want to make an addition to the May 7th minutes on the top of the third page where there was a discussion about street sweeping. It says Passarelli responded to the Public Works that the Public Works Department can be contacted. And I think it should also note that Kelly provided the city's complaint website link, which I think is the city's website /complaints. But I think it would be good to have that in the minutes.
Okay.
So that's my only suggestion. Is everyone in agreement with that? Oh, good.
So if you want a formal motion, I will move to approve the minutes of April 30th, 2022 as written and May 7th, 2022 with the single change the chair just proposed on page 3.
Second.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Moving on. It's been moved to approve the minutes. We already did all that. At this time, we'll open the meeting to any community members that would like to discuss city business with the committee. Those wishing to speak that are not at City Hall, please email finance@milwaukeeoregon.gov or raise your hand in Zoom. You can also write a comment in the Zoom chat to indicate you would like to speak. Are there any members of the community that would like to speak?
No.
Michael's not seeing anything.
No, there's none.
Okay. So we'll move on. Now we're ready for the city manager update from Ann Ober, who just joined us.
Hello. Thank you for giving me some time.
Actually, before you launch in, could maybe Bonnie introduce our new member since it's his first meeting? Oh,
good idea.
Actually, since she is talking to someone, would you mind telling us a little bit?
Hi, everyone. My name is David. I grew up in Southeast Portland and have lived in Milwaukie for a little bit now. We live in the Hector Campbell area. I'm a tax accountant for a aircraft leasing company. I don't really know why I'm mentioning this, but that's what I do. I count beans. I was really interested in helping to kind of give back and help with the budget committee.
Great. Well, thank you.
I also have a 10-month-old baby who's very cute.
Hey, I got a 1-month-old.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so I'm with you.
Good
Thanks
luck.
for being here.
In sleeplessness. You're with him in sleep.
Solidarity.
You know, I got that part down. Working on the other stuff.
Okay, moving on, we'll have our report from our city manager.
Thank you and welcome. It's nice to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited.
So we're busy. I think we're busy is probably the best way to put it right now. We have a number of projects that are starting up, a few that I just wanted to highlight since this is the budget committee. The first is that we are expecting the CET funding to be released for public bid process for requests to receive some of the funding for affordable housing. That should be posting at the end of the month. So for anyone who may be watching who is developing affordable housing and is looking for maybe some additional revenue in order to offset the cost of the affordability, those funds will be available for consideration. We also are going to be posting this building in the next couple of weeks. So this building is going to be up for sale or lease in the next couple of weeks. If you're interested in receiving more information about that bid package, please just send me an email. My email address is ober, O-B-E-R-A, at milwaukeeoregon.gov. And we'll make sure that you receive the package when it comes through. In more exciting news, now those are really exciting, I can actually say that. We have been working, the council has been having discussions about bringing parks back into the city of Milwaukee as a parks department instead of providing them through a parks district. We're going to be talking to council tomorrow night about that opportunity for them. There's really two pieces to this. One piece is whether or not we want to leave and have our own parks department. The second is how we pay for that. So the discussion tomorrow night will have dialogue around both components of that, and council will give some direction about where we want to go. Are there any other questions, or has anyone heard about anything that you'd like to discuss or better understand?
I guess my only question is, if we're posting City Hall for sale soon, what does that imply about the timeline to move to the new building?
The timeline is still the same. So we have just finished the initial designs for the interior of the new City Hall. We've been talking to council about that for their spaces, but we also have been talking to staff, and I think we're very close. The pieces that we're still working through in terms of design really are our front desk. Our goal is that there's one front desk to City Hall so that everybody can get all of their questions answered in one space instead of us sending people to different facilities. So that's what we're working on right now, but we're expecting that we will be moving in at the end of next summer.
The building's still occupied.
The building is still occupied. They will not be out of the building until December 31st.
That's what I thought.
Yep. I should just be really clear. If council decides to proceed with parks, there are two options currently on that discussion. One is a fee. One would be an actual ballot measure levy that would increase our property tax. So as our budget committee, it's just probably really good for you all to know we're having a discussion about increasing our property tax. There's also a discussion about our climate fee that's going to be coming forward in September or October about levying a new climate fee on our utility bills. So those would be two separate revenue increases.
Yeah, folks who aren't on the city council and haven't otherwise read it might want to read the staff report for tomorrow's meeting, because I think it gives you a lot of background about the parks, on the parks issue.
My recollection is that we gave up some taxing authority to the Parks District at
the time it was created. It's possible, actually it's probable that we did, but I don't have that information tonight, and I don't know.
But that would be considered in terms of what it would reclaiming that if we're taking it back?
We actually would need to do it as a levy. So it's a 5-year operating levy. We would have to go out every 5 years. We can't just reclaim it into our property tax. But to be clear, what we're at least talking to council about is the exact same rate for our taxpayers. So it's not an increase.
It wouldn't be an increase because we wouldn't be paying them anymore. It would just,
correct.
Yeah, I think it would be important to clarify that to people.
Yep. This is the same cost. It's just received by a different entity.
Right.
For the same services.
Okay. Dredging my memory bank here. Okay, so now we've had, do you have anything else to add, Ann?
No, not unless anyone has questions.
Okay.
Okay.
The next item of business is to discuss and agree on the proposed meeting dates for the coming year, which Bonnie will address.
Yeah, so I listed out the next fiscal year of proposed meeting dates, and the first one starts on November 14th, then we go into February 13th, May 15th, and August 14th. I don't need a formal vote or anything, I just wanted to see if these dates are okay with everybody, and if those dates would work for you, then we'll get meetings on the calendars and so forth.
Are they tied to a particular day of the month every 3 months?
They are every third Monday of the month unless there's a holiday, which I believe is February, is the President's Day.
Well, I'm the one that has the least amount of conflicts with anything, so. Anybody else have any comments about those dates?
The 13th isn't Valentine's Day, is it?
No, it's the day before.
Cool, perfect.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
Good question.
Okay, so I will go ahead and get those on the calendar for you, everybody. And that's it. That's all I have for the meeting dates.
And now we will move to the main course, which is the presentation of the quarterly financial report by Bunny.
Okay, so this quarterly report, our fourth quarter of fiscal year 22 is very much like what we discussed already through the budget process and the budget hearings that we just went through. I'll give you a couple of quick highlights. Again, these are unaudited financial numbers because we are going through the annual financial audit right now. We are contracted with Aldrich CPA firm. They're new this year. And we are going to have the first of the 2 audits that we have for one fiscal year will start in interim. So in September. So we have the interim audit that starts in September. That is mostly to look over internal controls. That's where they do testing to make sure that there's more than one sign off on invoices and so forth. And that's the first of the 2 audits. The second.
So it's like a procedural audit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the second part of the audit is the financial audit. And that is when they really dig into the financials and look at all the work papers that we do and all the accruals and make sure that we are following all of the generally accepted accounting principles and rules. And that is scheduled for early December at this point. So in this report, we do try to cover as much as we can with unaudited numbers, but these numbers will likely change as we go through. Plus, we're also doing the quarterly a little bit earlier this time, so there's a lot of work ahead of us for the audit, is what I'm saying. The next thing I just wanted to go over is just what we do as far as the financial documents of the city. So we have 3 main financial documents. That is the budget. And we just adopted the budget and I just submitted for the GFOA award. We won't know if we've received that award for at least 9 to 12 months. It takes quite a bit of time to go through the process. The second document that we do is the annual comprehensive financial report, which is also known as ACFR. And we have submitted that for the fiscal year 2021 audit. And we're still waiting to hear back if we receive the award. I don't foresee that we wouldn't, but it does take them time to go through the process. And that's also the same for the People's Annual Financial Report, which is another financial report that we do. And that's the one that's more user-friendly for community members. It's a lot more easier to read. It's not a whole bunch of accounting financial speak. So with all that said, we are very proud to get those documents and get those awards. And we're known to have a Triple Crown Award, which really helps us set us apart with other cities and other jurisdictions where it just shows that we have very sound financials and we have very transparent process. So kudos to the finance team. We're very proud of those awards. So that's the main parts that I want to talk about as far as just the general information. And then we'll move into the utility fees, which is actually on page 6, unless anybody had any questions on the beginning section.
I'm always interested in this issue. And I'm just wondering what the process is in terms of what your process is what the city's process is to reduce the outstanding balances at the same time giving people the options to deal with whatever their situations are.
Yeah, so we have a number of accounts that are delinquent. We have put on all those delinquent accounts a payment plan. automatically, and we send out notices to those accounts. And we are working with those accounts to see if there's any way we can help. We've offered them St. Vincent's. We've had quite a bit of success in that, but we do have quite a few that are still delinquent.
I guess that I was looking at, I don't see it here right now, the fact that it's like the people that are in the 1 month, 2 month, 3 months are fairly staying on track, but it's the older ones that seem to have the problem. And I'm just wondering if there's a different process that's going to be addressed to that, if those people have exhausted their utility relief already or what.
It's not that they've exhausted their utility relief, it's that they've chosen not to participate.
Oh, they've chosen not to,
So the first month, and I'm going to hand this back to Bonnie because she actually knows this way better, but the first month, council knows, we moved everyone onto these other payment plans to try and minimize it. We actually did very few water shutoffs that month. Second month, we were able to get the number down again, but we now see a very long list of people who actually just aren't responding to our emails, even with the payment plan. So for those, especially those higher end, higher value ones, we're going to have to start doing water shutoffs and seeing if we can get people to respond.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's interesting information. The higher end people are not paying.
Well, the higher cost, I should say, the ones
The ones that have more accrued. Okay.
Yeah, so
Got
things
that.
over $3,000 at this point. We do have several accounts that are over several that are over $5,000. We have some individuals who have moved and are choosing to not pay. So it's stuff like that where we're going to have to start collecting this month.
Yeah, okay.
So we did see a number of people coming in today to try and pay them off or pay them down, or at least get on their payment plans. But we are expecting this month is going to be an intense month.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, any other questions on utility fees? And I'll just kind of briefly touch on the staffing levels. No, okay. So the staffing levels, we actually have quite a few vacancies that were in this last quarter, but those have been offset by either filling those vacancies or we have recruitments already underway. This is not really anything abnormal to the normal that we do, abnormal to the normal. It's no different than what we normally see during each quarter. So. But we did have Public Works Administration included a partial vacancy, but we did add in the Parks Development Coordinator in the fourth quarter, and that's the limited term position that we talked about. Engineering Department included some vacancies and recruitment that is now underway. And then the Police Department included 3 sworn officer positions that have also been filled or currently recruited for. And then the stormwater had 2 vacant technicians and some seasonal temporary workers that are open. They're still having a hard time finding filling those vacancies, but that's just the market that we're in at the moment.
Is the planning department at full now? Mm-hmm. So they're
Yeah.
You know, last summer, I guess, we talked about the great resignation. And I mean, we did lose a number of people. I read an article this weekend about they say about 25% of the people, they've been doing surveying of people, and about 25% of people are sorry they left where they left. Yeah, so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting if we have anybody decide they want to come back at some point.
Well, and I think that we're still seeing people in crisis. So I want to call out, we have a number of people in our community and in our staff and all over the world who are just in mental health crisis right now. So we are seeing less shifting. We're seeing less loss of positions, but it doesn't mean that everybody's feeling okay. So part of what we're also as management team and union team and staffing are just trying to make sure that people are getting the support they need. In some cases, it means that they're just not fully up to where they were pre-pandemic in terms of their ability to be engaged. And so we're all trying to just be there for each other and support our way through this.
Can I ask, how is that going? Do you guys have the services you need? Do you have to be able to make sure that everyone is getting what they need for that? Because
We do. We have an EAP program. We actually have it through two different mechanisms, which means that anyone who is related to, whether or not you're insured by the city or not, if you work at the city and your partner works at the city, even if you don't take our insurance, you can actually get this coverage. So we have found ways to get coverage to all of our employees right now, just to try and make sure that they have somebody to talk to, and that gives them 6 to 8 calls with a trained counselor to talk through whatever's happening in their life. It is something that I really appreciated. We had a number of employees who were really focused on it over the last couple of years, and they've made sure that we've changed our benefits to assure all employees can access care.
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
let's see. You want to go on?
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, so moving on to page 9.
Hold on one second. I just should, since I said all that, thank Mary Rao, who's on this budget committee, for doing that. Thanks, Mary.
Okay, so moving on to page 9, we have the total fourth quarter fiscal year ending financials for the entire city. And you'll see here that we're expecting a change in the fund balance of about $6 million. That's pretty typical also for the fourth quarter, where we see the change in fund balance from the end of this fiscal year from the beginning of the fiscal year. And that's mostly related to actually the ARPA funds that we received in this last fourth quarter. So that's the big chunk of it. Other things you'll see is just going through the budget processes, just finding ways to cut costs, or, we didn't spend all the money on the capital projects we expected. So $6 million is usually pretty standard for what we've been seeing. Looking over at the general fund, there's a few items that I just wanted to point out here. Property taxes actually came in slightly higher than we expected, which is great. And that's mostly related to some new developments that we didn't anticipate during the budgeting process in the beginning. And so that's I believe it was for Railroad, 42nd and 43rd, some new homes there, and also King Road had some new development. We had an increase of the $2.25 million in intergovernmental for ARPA, which is the American Revenue Rescue Recovery Act, or American Rescue Plan Act, related to parks. And just kind of wrapping up revenue, the biggest items that we noted were fines and forfeitures and license and permits. They also came in less than projected, which we have seen throughout the entire budget cycle. And then as far as expenditures go, we had this does include the supplemental budget transfers that we did in May. But to point out the main items, we had community development came in quite a bit under budget, and that's mostly because of some projects that didn't get finished in that department. We had where we moved some costs also over to the Public Works Administration Department to cover the parks items as well. Engineering Department came in also lower due to some delays in some of the projects and professional services where they would have captured those costs. Facilities management also came in lower than expected, mostly because of operating of city buildings. This is also showing for the 2 full biennium years. So we also have to include fiscal year 2020 and part of 2021 when, sorry, not 2020, fiscal year 2021 and part of fiscal year 2022, where we were working from home. And then the last one is planning department expense savings costs included mapping and coding services for the comprehensive plan. Okay, so are there any questions on general fund?
Why is the PEG so low?
Sorry, say it again.
Why is the PEG so low?
We've been saving money.
The new city hall.
For the new city hall.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a good segue into new city hall. So City Hall Fund is starting on page 13. There's really nothing much to note there. It's pretty much the same that we've talked about through the budget process. We're anticipating an ending fund balance of 1.7 million, which will be carried over through this next fiscal year and used towards the construction or the renovations. Page 14 is debt service fund. And again, we talked about this through the budget hearings, but the City Hall Fund had a large amount in the fund balance ending, and that was related to a discrepancy for the transfer that we did years and years ago. So we right-sized that by not transferring the total amount of the lease that we were getting from the City Hall over to debt service to pay for the fund, for the debt service debt. Excuse me. We didn't pay. We did pay. We didn't transfer the total amount of the lease revenue that we got from City Hall Fund into the debt service fund to cover for that extra surplus. Does that make sense? Am I saying that totally? Okay. So basically we had a large amount in the debt service fund that was related to a transfer that happened years and years and years ago. And I believe that happened, we over-transferred related to something to do with one of the capital projects. So in the budget process, we talked about having the debt service fund and the City Hall Fund to help right-size that. So the City Hall Fund gets a lease payment from Advantis to stay at the building. That money stayed in the City Hall Fund, and we did not transfer that in the debt service fund because there was already enough money in the debt service fund to pay for the debt payment of the City Hall.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, that was a long way of saying that.
But so what is that money then used for? That rent money from
It'll be
Advantis?
towards the renovations.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So we just kept it in City Hall Fund to use it for the building. Okay. And then moving over to page 15 for the building fund. It's the same story that we've seen in the building fund. They've had a large amount of development that has increased over the last fiscal year. So we've had to, we're over budget on our revenue streams. So we had to increase the materials and services cost through the budget transfer. So that's reflected here. We also have the GovBuilt system, the permitting system, which is the new system for the building department to use for permitting outside of the other system that we received, so Acela. So that's reflected in the building fund as well.
So remind me, is that a system, that's a state system that we tap into, or is that our own system we bought?
Acela is the state system.
Okay.
GovBuilt is the new system.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's supposed to be a lot more robust, a lot more user-friendly. And it's also an ability where we have not just the building permits, but we can also have business registration. We can have other permittings
Right.
to be in one centralized location.
Right.
And the trigger for that really was the tree code.
Right.
So we were layering a bunch of permits, and it wasn't allowing us to track all of the permits that an individual would need to pull for development or for other purposes. So that it was just finally at the point that we needed more of a system.
Do we have to continue using Acela too? Do we have to have a duplicate system for the building department, or can we just use this new system?
It's my understanding that we're going to stop using Acela once we get everything converted over.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Page 16 is the Construction Excise Tax Fund. That's the new name of the fund. It's actually Affordable Housing Fund in the previous budget cycle. And there's really not much to say. Really, typically, this fund kind of matches what happens in the building fund, just because new development comes on, then additional revenue comes into this fund.
So I have a question on that, probably a question for Anne. You talked about that we're looking for RFQs or RFPs or whatever for affordable housing projects. And I suppose it's not a bad thing to fire something out like that in case we're missing an opportunity. But when we created that, the concept was to be opportunistic. And as market rate developments were occurring, we could reach out to them and say, hey, could we buy down 10 units or could we buy down whatever to create units in those developments? So have we changed our strategy or?
You know, we've had multiple iterations. I actually can't tell you if it's a change or not. You all tell me if it's a change as we're talking about it. We are talking to developers in Milwaukie who are interested in adding affordable units to their developments. So that is absolutely a part of the group. It's part of the timing as well, is that we knew that we were going to have a number of applications that would actually be able to discern how much money they needed at that point in the process to be able to make decisions around whether or not they could do affordable units based on a contribution from us. And if so, how many? So the way we're putting this out into the world is that we will base any decision on how many units you're providing at what decreased cost for how long. And it's going to be a simple math game. If you do 30 units and it's for 30 years and you can prove that you're going to be able to secure those as rent assisted units, then you qualify better than somebody who can do 60% AMI for 15 years. And so it's really just going to be a math game. Who can get us the most units that can guarantee those units for the longest amount of time? But we do have a number of developers in town who are at the point in their processes to be able to do that. I think at a recent budget meeting, I talked about the upcoming SDCs. You'll hear about it more tomorrow night. But we have seen significant growth and development that's coming over the course of the coming 3 years. And so there are a large number of developments who are ready to have that conversation with us right now.
Including Hillside?
Yep.
So the RFP or whatever that's coming out, is the money that's going to be made available phased as a portion of what will be available over some period of time? I mean, what is the criteria of how much is
allocated?
Yeah.
So we have a couple of options. During the budget process, you all actually adopted a budget that said how much we were going to be putting out for this first tranche. One of the things we are looking at is
The first tranche being 1 year's amount.
well, it's not 1 year's amount. It's it's a portion of what we currently have in our fund balance. Just knowing that we have been collecting this now for, I believe, 5 years. So we have built up a fund that is not great to sit on, right? The whole point of this is to get this out to units. So we're trying to get as much of this out to units as possible. We originally, I think, were looking at 1.2 based on what was approved in the budget. We actually have 1.8. So part of that discussion with the team is whether or not we can come back to you all and say, hey, we have enough viable candidates. We'd like to release more. And so I think Joseph and Bonnie have been talking about how do we handle that in the bid process so that we don't accidentally lose a really good development opportunity. But we didn't come to you all with the full amount the first time. So we're trying to balance that out right now. So the bid package, I think, is at 1.23 according to the budget or something similar. And then you all allocated additional money during the budget process to increase the number of units. And I believe that took it up to like $1.9 million. But you're correct, Leslie, we will be having more. We have development coming, and in some of those units, they're not building affordable, which means that we'll get the CET payments before occupancy. So you'll start seeing those numbers go up, and then we'll have another opportunity to re-release at that point.
Within the biennium. You think that within the biennium?
I think that there's a possibility of it. We're trying to also discern how much work it is to get the funds out. because we've also promised you all the urban renewal programming. It's the same employees who are going to be doing both sides of that, and it's all helping the same families in many cases. So we're trying to make sure that we have the programs up and running on the urban renewal side, and that we're actually, when we take debt, spending it within the 3 years that we're legally obligated to spend it. So there's a whole bunch of things that are going into this discussion right now, but I did speak with Joseph about this today. And my guess is we'll have a pretty good update for you at our next budget meeting with how this first letting of the funding goes. And then we'll have a better sense for how often we can actually go through that process.
And it's worth noting that not very many cities have managed to actually disperse CET funds yet. We're going to be one of the first. So there's not a lot of, other reference points that we can look at to know how it's going to go.
Yep. Well, and I think part of what we've also learned is we're a small organization, which we talk about a lot, but making sure that there is a process out in the world that's tracking these, because we don't actually have in-house staff who are great at tracking these. Just we don't have enough FTE count to be able to track them. If you partner these dollars with other dollars, though, there are federal requirements, or there are state requirements, or there are county requirements, or there are metro requirements right now that will actually track the units. So that is part of this discussion as well, to make sure that we don't put money into developments that end up being used as for profit or for going rate.
Those are funds that are not running through Milwaukee's budget, but we will get reporting on it. Correct. What you're saying.
That's what we're working on right now.
Okay.
Is so that there would be a response back from those agencies, or some sort of, even the developer providing the same paperwork to us that they're already providing to one of the other agencies, that allows for us to have confidence that the units are being maintained. Others? By the way, Joseph is the better person to report on all of this. So Joseph is the better person to report on all of this. So I will make sure he's here in November.
Okay. Good question, Mark. Okay, any other questions? How about it?
Okay, so the next fund is library fund. There's really not much to note here. We did see an uptick in this last fiscal year for fines being collected, but we're still quite a bit under budget to basically fiscal year 2021. And then moving over to page 18 for the transportation fund, I realized that the notes didn't copy over, so we will get that corrected in here. And we'll make sure to repost it. But again, there's not really a whole lot to talk about with the transportation fund, as any different than we've talked about before. The franchise fees did come in higher than we anticipated, which we saw in the budget process. Cash balances remained higher, which means that we actually got more investment earnings than we expected, and the cash balances were higher because we expected to spend more in the capital projects. So it's kind of this weird offset when you spend more and you don't spend enough on capital projects, you end up getting more interest, not a whole lot, but definitely more than we expected. But as we have seen in this past fiscal year, even how projects are starting to really move and ramp up, we should see that cash balance start to decline. Okay. Is there any questions on transportation fund? The next is the water fund. The main thing here is fees and connections did come in a little bit higher than budgeted, which is great. Those are mostly related to new connections and some other additional usage that we didn't anticipate during the budget process. We are seeing ARPA funds in the water fund to cover for projects that will happen in fiscal year 2023 and 2024. And that's in the intergovernmental.
I just want to jump in real fast, because we did have a change in one of the ARPA fund balances that we transferred to Public Works. You're going to see a supplemental on it at a future date. So I just wanted to be transparent with the budget committee about the move. We realized that we had not gone back and done any after action reporting on how COVID went or how any of the experiences for our staff or community were during this time. So the one opportunity we have to fix our emergency operations plan from this experience, to learn from it before we lose the content to people changing jobs or just forgetting. So we are using $50,000 of the ARPA funds that we had transferred to Public Works for this purpose. We have enough cash to cover it right now. It's why we don't have a supplemental before you today. But Peter was able to find money in one of the projects that he was putting it towards for water, which is why I'm saying it here. And those would be transferred into Public Works Administration. Any concerns?
That will result in a report or an updated emergency plan or?
So what it's going to, it's a implementation plan that we've asked for. So it's two things. One is I think it's really important for the city to have a historical document that we put into our databases that just say what happened. It's a strange moment in our history, and it's important for future generations to be able to understand how we function during this time. And hopefully learn from some of it, but at minimum, know what happened. The second piece, though, is being able to update our EOP. And that means that they're going to actually do a review of all of the processes we went through. And then they'll go through our emergency operations plan, and they'll tell us what they think the top 10 to 15 items are that we need to do in order to update that for better functionality in the future.
So it's $50,000 that's sort of being parked in water, but it's really not just about water.
It has been. We've got the Stanley project. We have a number of very expensive water projects that we had moved the ARPA funds into that were allowable expenses. He just felt like it's an allowable expense under ARPA, and he felt like that was something that he wanted this document too. So it was one of those things where we felt like we could find a way to cut a couple corners in order to cover this cost as well. And if we can't cut them, then we will find new cash and we will replace it into the fund. So just so everyone knows, we will still build well, but we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose this. When we had, there was a critical employee who left who really was at the heart of a lot of our work, and it made us realize that we were going to start losing more and more people, and it just would get impossible for us to learn from this.
In effect, it's evaluating the risk management of employee functions.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
Can I back up one? I just noticed something that I hadn't caught before.
Okay.
On transportation.
What page are you on?
Sorry, page 18. So intergovernmental local gas tax down significantly. Was this shouldn't still be reflecting.
So remember, we had all got sent home March 2020.
Right.
That was only a few months in, right before fiscal year 2021 started. So a lot of that is actually related to 21 and 22, although technically I see where your question is because it doesn't really quite look like that.
Right.
Because we have 116 in 2021, 101 in 2022.
Yeah.
But I think cumulatively, that is the biggest part of why we're seeing the decline, because we budgeted still more than we expected. But we can go back and look and get more detailed numbers and send that back to you.
I would be curious about that.
Okay, or to the rest of the committee members.
Also, we show our franchise fee for PGE, but we don't show our franchise fee for Northwest Natural here.
That's actually in the general fund.
Why?
I don't know. I believe it's all related to general operations fees. I don't know. I'd have
The
to,
whole concept theoretically is that they're using our right of way. They tear up our right of way. And so we need it in transportation to rebuild the roads, blah, blah, blah.
yeah. I don't know. I'd have to actually go back to the original. I have to do a little research on that.
I would be making it up, but I could make some things up. I mean, I think one of them may also be the polls. There may actually be fines paid into both because that's sitting on your roadway, under, but I don't know. We'll go back and find out for you, Mayor.
Oh, because the gas lines are under the ground and the poles are.
Yeah, and it just may,
Both in the right of way.
they're both in the right of way. But I know how we have to function with PGE is just different when their lines are above ground. We'll go back and look. I'm making it up too much. We'll
Maybe
find out for you.
historical.
It could be.
It would probably be nice just generally to have a little more comprehensive look at franchise fees and
Again.
have them all in one place and yeah.
So where is that in general fund?
It's buried. It's not listed out just like it is in the transportation PGE. It's all, it's in that one line right under property taxes, all within franchise fees. We lump it. We have all the other franchise fees and it goes right in there.
So PGE is also in here or not?
We have,
It may be a portion of it. So rather than us making it up, I'd really like to just.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it would be great to see a report
okay.
looking at all the franchise fees and kind of trends, what they've been doing for the last
Okay.
5 years
Okay.
or something.
Okay.
Just a sense of
Yeah.
where those are going.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep. Can do that. Okay. Any other questions on transportation water? The next fund was wastewater fund, starting on page 24. This fund also has a very similar story to the water fund. We have new connections and usage, which drove up the fees and charges up just a little bit over we expected for budget. The intergovernmental that you see there, the 750, is mostly related to the ARPA funds coming in for some projects that we allocated towards that. Cash balances are what's driving the investment earnings. And lastly, looking into expenditures, we had some vacancies and then also some capital outlay that we didn't actually spend down on. And then last, well, actually not last, we have stormwater fund, and it's a very similar situation. The biggest thing here to point out is that we didn't issue the debt, which is creating the fund balance to be a little bit less than what we actually anticipated. But we did continue to work on the projects that we had expected. We also had some similarities with the investment earnings, and we had some utility technician vacancies that drove the savings in the personnel services.
Is this the only place where the tree permit revenue is listed?
Yes, the tree permits and fees. Yeah, that's actually a good point. In the stormwater fund, the tree permits is where the revenue comes into.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the staff positions are funded from there? Like the Courtney, is that her name? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to get myself into trouble if I try.
Okay.
We're going to be coming back to you with that answer at the September meeting. Because we'll be talking about
that.
Well, so the discussion has been that we're currently spending stormwater dollars on trees. The discussion I've had with the directors is that I'd like to understand what calculation we're using to assure that we're fulfilling the promises we've made around the utility rates for trees and the MS4 permit, right? So how does one large tree equate to beneficial to the MS4 permit for stormwater cleaning? And there's a number of calculations out there that do this work. They're just trying to figure out which one is the right one for us. So we're having two discussions on that front. One is, how do I make sure that we're transparent with our ratepayers? That means coming back to you all with an update about how we're spending utility funds, because this is a new use. The second part of that discussion is we're talking about the climate positions. And in some cases, those positions are included in that rate, and in some cases, they are not. right? So you could either leave them in stormwater, or you could have them in this new climate rate because you're increasing that fund balance to cover the FTE. I should also just let you know, we have had a lot of conversations about the Meek Street project over the years. It's one of the reasons why our stormwater rates are why our collections are high right now, why it looks like we have a large fund balance. That, we actually got somewhere with the railroad. It looks like the project's actually going to move. So it's actually a really big deal. So in the next 6 months, what I've heard from Jen Garbley is that she should have an IGA with the railroad, and that would put us into construction next summer. So the railroad portion is $1 million. Then it's 3.5 million in construction. So that'll take the total fund balance down by $4.5 million. There's another project that is sitting in there that we have talked about doing. I think it's apple, hazel, and another plum, another fruit. And that project, the issue is more just trying to make sure that we have the capacity to do the projects at the right time. We've been trying to make sure that we don't ever cut into roads and that we actually are pairing the projects. So that one may get pushed, but it's being pushed because other funds aren't prepared to do the rest of their project at that site. So that's why we're holding on to that fund balance. But this is the largest share of the fund balance, plus we're doing the master plan this year. So once we do the master plan, we'll have a better sense for what the other projects are. And that then will give you a sense for where we are on revenues and ability to use those revenues towards things like the tree program. So all of this is to say we're looking at all of it together. Peter, Natalie, Steve, Jen Garbley, everyone's looking at this, trying to make sure we're being really transparent with our public about what's paying for what. And that you all have an opportunity to weigh in on that when we're ready.
For a little historic reference for newer folks, the fruit streets, apple, plum, those flood pretty badly during big storms. And it's been years, decades probably, that's been happening.
And where are they?
Wetlands was filled at one point
They're in
in that
Linwood.
area because of stupid land use laws. So this project's been kind of a long time coming.
Yeah, I had a tour with, I think when I was on the CUAB or was it Planning Commission? Maybe it was Planning Commission.
With you.
Yeah, and that had to be 12 years ago. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, and that was how I was able to talk the first council I was on into the higher
Stormwater.
fees, because we've been kicking that can down the road for decades.
Yeah.
And those people were it was like constant flooding. And then there was that one property that we couldn't stop construction on.
Yeah.
It was basically purely it was a wetlands.
Yeah.
But absorbed a lot of that floodwater, so just made it worse. Anyway, I think that kind of context is helpful for new council members. So when it comes up,
Yep. No, I appreciate it. And we've
Pass the
actually,
torch.
Councilor Pasarabadi and I have spent probably more time on this at this point than almost any other topic. Just because it's complex and it's changing right now. So trying to make sure that everybody has the most up-to-date information. We control a lot of our right-of-way in the areas where we need to be able to install these utilities, but we don't control all of them, and railroads are definitely the most complex.
are we ready to go to system development charges? Because I have questions.
Yes, yep, we're ready.
So 50%,
Where are you?
and yet we're seeing construction up. Well,
What
revenue
page are
for
you
system
on?
Development charges. Sorry, page 28. Am I misreading it?
I'm sorry, where are you seeing that?
I think you're on page 29.
29, yes. Development charges. Yeah. Page 29, system top.
On transportation?
Is that what it is?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
28 is all
Yes.
SDCs, and then they're broken out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so are you asking why it's at 50% versus closer to 100?
Well, closer to, well, actually, I would, given that construction is up, right?
Want me to take it?
Yeah.
I would have assumed that all of it was up.
So we're having some interesting conversations right now with our council, and there are large dollar SDCs that would be coming into those conversations that we weren't sure we wanted to make decisions about transferring right away. So we are collecting our SDCs at the point of occupancy for large developments right now, instead of at the time of permitting. So you are seeing a significant amount of development in town. You are seeing some very large development. In a couple of those cases, we are probably 8 to 10 months out from receiving the SDCs.
You're basically, let me restate this.
Sure.
You're saying that the fees are now being collected later when a C of O is issued as opposed to when the approval is granted.
Correct. And historically, the state actually asked us a couple of years ago to start collecting them at the point of C of O instead of at the point of when we were doing the permitting. And in some cases, so for like a home, a smaller development, those are within weeks of each other. It does not make any sense to play around with it. And those funds should be delivered at the time that it's easiest for the constituent. Right now, that's actually during permitting because we can tell them exactly how much it is and they pay it instead of having to worry about whether or not there's a change or an inflation rate. In terms of these larger developments, though, it means that you may be transferring dollars to NCPRD at this point that you may not want to be transferring until we have made it through court.
Yes, there are.
Okay. No, and I'm not saying that that's the only reason. The state has recommended that this is the way we should be doing these collections, but this is a discussion we've had. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, if there's no more questions on SCCs, then just looking briefly at the Milwaukie Redevelopment Commission or the URA fund, again, property taxes came in favorable than what we anticipated. And that was related to some developments that we didn't anticipate in the budgeting process. We did get a lot more in investment earnings, mostly because of that property tax cash flow, which we didn't expect. And we really didn't spend any money, but we are anticipating spending money in this fiscal year, as you saw through the budget process. And then with that, I don't actually have anything else in this. You wanted to go through the project report. I did want to say thank you to Judy Serio, who helped with this report, and Michael Osborne for working on the first quarterly report on this side of the table. Thank you. That's all I have.
I just want to interrupt for a couple of quick items. Number one, I want to thank Bonnie and her team. It really has been, I think every single time we put one of these reports out, it gets better. I really appreciate the chair and her assistance in making this an even stronger document. I think that every time I read it, it's just so much more transparent. So thank you for that. I also just wanted for fun to thank Michael for coming to work for us. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know him better. I have deeply respected him as a budget committee member over the years. As I said to him when he first started, he has asked some of the most important and profound questions to me of my whole time here. And he was always very clear about what our responsibilities are to hold people accountable and to watch the taxpayers' dollars. So I really value that in him, and I'm thrilled to have him on the team. Finally, I wanted to just welcome back Mary. She was an incredible gift to the city for the last several months, and I literally could not have done it without her. She is so knowledgeable on HR, and she was an absolute pleasure to work with. So I also had a lot of fun getting to know her better. And it was great having a chance to see her sort of reflect on what the city has become over the years after her previous term working for the city. So thank you, Mary, very much.
Thanks from me too. Yeah. I would like to offer some thanks also as project on Southeast 43rd Avenue is now basically almost completely done. It is amazing how much the people, everybody in the neighborhood, even before it was finished, commented on the ability to have sidewalks to get to the Safeway. I mean, it's amazing to me that people haven't been killed on that street for years and years and years. And it's really quite exciting to see it as it finally came to fruition. And I know that that's because city staff really pushed it and made it happen. And I have great appreciation as someone who is immediately affected by that on a daily basis.
Thank
Okay.
you, and I'd love to take credit for it, but I also just want to make sure that we're really clear that this council over the last 7 years has worked really hard and has taken risks around increasing rates in a way that very few councils do. So thank you to this council as well.
I agree. I think this council is fabulous, and I tell everybody about it every time I get a chance. Okay, so we're done with the quarterly report. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
A second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adjourn the meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? With all those in favor, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.